Maybe if you stayed home more, I wouldn't need another man. My wife threw a New Year's party with her lover while I was at the hospital. So I made her face the true price of karma. I'm Sebastian, 34 years old, and what I'm going to tell you changed my life forever. It was New Year's Eve, just 3 hours before midnight, and I was at the hospital with my mom who'd had a fall. My wife, Lorena, had told me she'd stay home resting cause she had a migraine. What I discovered that night broke my soul and set off a chain of events nobody could have foreseen. It was 9 p.m. when I got the message from my neighbor, Mr. Ramirez, a man in his late 60s who lived in the apartment next door. Sebastian, there's a lot of noise in your house. Loud music and laughter. Is everything okay? My heart raced. Lorena was supposedly sick in bed. I replied that I'd check and immediately called my wife. She didn't answer. I tried 3 more times. Nothing. The phone rang and rang until it went to voicemail. Something inside me broke at that moment. I'd been married to Lorena for 7 years. 7 years in which I'd worked double shifts as a civil engineer to give her the life she wanted. The spacious apartment in the city center, the annual beach vacations, her new car. I'd gotten it all with my effort while she'd quit her job 3 years ago cause, in her words, she needed time to find herself. I explained to my sister Claudia, who'd arrived at the hospital to relieve me with Mom, that I had to go home urgently. She saw something in my face that worried her. "What's wrong, Seabass?" she asked, but I just shook my head and ran to the parking lot. The drive from the hospital to my apartment normally took 25 minutes. That night, I did it in 15 with my heart hammering in my chest and my hands sweating on the steering wheel. When I got to my building, I could hear the music from the street. Loud techno, laughter, the unmistakable sound of a party. In my house, I took the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor. The door to my apartment was slightly ajar, the thundering music hitting my ears. I took a deep breath and pushed the door. The scene I found is seared into my memory. My living room full of people I didn't know. There were empty champagne bottles everywhere, broken glasses on the floor, and in the center of it all, dancing without a care, was Lorena, but she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, his hands on my wife's waist, their mouths so close they were practically kissing as they moved to the music's rhythm. Lorena wore a red dress I'd never seen, tight and provocative, completely different from the sleepwear she was supposed to be wearing for her terrible migraine. I stood frozen at the entrance for what felt like hours, but was probably just seconds. Nobody had seen me yet. The betrayal hit every cell in my body. Then, Lorena turned and our eyes met. I saw her face go from pleasure to surprise, and then to something I'd never seen in her, pure panic. The music was still playing when she abruptly pulled away from the man and walked towards me, stumbling slightly in her high heels. "Sebastian, this isn't what it looks like," she started to say, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Migraine," I said in a low voice, so low she could probably only hear me over the music. "You said you had a migraine." The man she'd been dancing with came over with an arrogant smile on his face. He was younger than me, maybe about 28, with slick back hair and expensive clothes. "Hey, buddy, relax. It's just a New Year's party. Don't be a spoilsport." Something inside me definitely broke at that moment. I looked around at all those strangers in my house, drinking my liquor, dirtying my home. And then I looked at Lorena. Her eyes were glassy. She'd clearly been drinking, and on her face there was no genuine regret, just the annoyance of being caught. "Everyone out," I said in a firm voice. "Now." The arrogant guy laughed. "Who do you think you are to? I'm the owner of this apartment." And I interrupted him, my voice getting louder. "And you have exactly 3 minutes to get out before I call the police." Lorena grabbed my arm. "Sebastian, you're overreacting. We were just celebrating." I shook off her grip with a sharp movement. "Celebrating while your husband is at the hospital with his sick mother? Celebrating while you pretend to be in bed with a headache? That's what you were celebrating." The silence that followed was deafening. Someone had turned off the music. All the guests were staring at us as if we were a show. Lorena opened her mouth to say something, but I had already taken out my phone. 2.5 minutes, I said, dialing the numbers 911 on the screen so everyone could see. People started to move then, quickly gathering their things, muttering apologies or insults under their breath. In less than 5 minutes, the apartment was empty except for Lorena and me. The arrogant guy was the last to leave, not without whispering something to Lorena that I couldn't hear, but which made her nod slightly. When the door closed behind the last guest, I turned to my wife. She was standing in the middle of the destroyed living room, arms crossed over her chest, and in her eyes was defiance, not remorse. "Well," she said, her voice full of an attitude I'd never known her to have. "Are you going to scream at me now? Are you going to make a scene?" I looked at her steadily, really seeing her for the first time in years. "Who was that man?" She shrugged. "A friend. A friend," I repeated slowly. "A friend who touches you like that. A friend you dance with as if I don't exist. Maybe if you spent more time at home instead of always working, I wouldn't have to look for fun elsewhere," she blurted out, and her words were like knives straight to my heart. I worked so hard for her, to give us a good life, so she could find herself, without financial worries. And this was what I got in return. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "How long have you been with him?" Lorena looked at me with a mix of contempt and something that might have been relief. "For months. We met at the gym. He's a yoga instructor. For months, a third of a year. While I was working late, while I was saving for the vacation she wanted, while I was paying her credit cards without asking questions about the excessive charges. She had been building a secret life with another man. "Do you love him?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. She sighed as if my question was tediously predictable. "I don't know, Sebastian. What I do know is that Diego makes me feel alive in a way you don't anymore. He makes me feel young, excited. With you, everything is routine, responsibility, work. Blind." Now the arrogant guy had a name. And what was worse, my wife had just admitted she felt more alive with him than with me. At that moment, something changed inside me. The pain was still there, sharp and brutal, but underneath it something colder, more calculated, was emerging. I looked around, at the broken glasses, the empty bottles, the stains on my carpet that had cost a fortune. I looked at our wedding photo hanging on the wall, where Lorena smiled with that smile that had made me fall in love. But that woman in the photo didn't exist anymore. Or maybe she never had. "I want a divorce," I said with a calm that surprised even me. Lorena blinked. She clearly didn't expect that response. "What, Sebastian? Don't be dramatic. We can talk about this. Go to couples therapy." "No," I interrupted her. "There's nothing to talk about. I want you out of this house tomorrow morning." She laughed. A sharp, unpleasant laugh. "Out. This is my house too, Sebastian. We're married, remember? You can't just kick me out." That's when I smiled. A small, cold smile that made her take a step back. "Ah, Lorena, always so confident, always so sure that everything belongs to you. But there's something you don't know." Her expression changed, the arrogance giving way to a hint of uncertainty. "What are you saying?" I took out my phone and showed her the screen. It was a legal document I'd saved there months ago after a conversation with my lawyer about asset protection. "This apartment, the car you drive, the bank accounts, everything is in my name. I acquired everything before we got married or with my money during the marriage. And according to the laws in our country, in case of proven infidelity, you're not entitled to anything." The color drained from her face. "You're lying. Ask your yoga instructor if he can pay for a lawyer for you to verify it," I said coldly. "You have until noon tomorrow to get your personal things. Clothes, jewelry, whatever was yours before the marriage. Everything else stays." "You can't do this," she yelled, her voice finally breaking. I walked to the door and opened it, looking at her steadily. "Yes, I can and I will. Now, please leave. You can go to Diego's. I'm sure his yoga studio has floor space for you to sleep on." Lorena looked at me with eyes full of tears, but I no longer felt sadness seeing her cry. It was nothing, an absolute void where my love for her used to be. "See you tomorrow at 12, I said. "Don't be late." She stumbled out of the apartment, and I closed the door behind her. Only then, in the silence of my shattered home, did I allow the full weight of the betrayal to hit me. But I didn't cry. Not yet, because I knew this was just the beginning. What Lorena didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that I had more cards up my sleeve, and when I played my next move, karma would finally catch up to my unfaithful wife in a way she could never have imagined. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the sofa in my wrecked living room, looking at the empty bottles and the remains of the party I'd interrupted. The clock hands moved slowly towards midnight. When the new year arrived, I heard the fireworks exploding outside, people shouting congratulations in the streets, and I was completely alone in my apartment with my marriage in pieces at my feet. At 2 a.m., I got a message from Lorena. "I'm at my sister Paula's house." I'll come by for my things tomorrow. Please reconsider. Can we fix this? I didn't reply. I just blocked her number and her sister's too, 'cause I knew Paula would try to call me to defend Lorena as she'd always done. What I did next was methodical and calculated. First, I took pictures of every corner of the destroyed apartment. The broken glasses, the stains on the carpet, the empty bottles, everything. I needed documentation of what I'd found. Then I checked the building's security cameras. I'd forgotten to mention a small detail to Lorena. 6 months ago, after a series of robberies in the building, the Residents Association had installed cameras in the hallways, and those cameras had captured every person who entered and left my apartment that night. At 7 a.m., I went down to the building manager's office. Don Ernesto, a 50-year-old man who knew all the residents, greeted me with a worried face. "Sebastian, I heard the commotion last night. Mr. Ramirez told me. Is everything okay?" "No, Don Ernesto. Nothing is okay," I told him with a tired voice. "I need copies of yesterday's security recordings, from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. He nodded with understanding. "Give me an hour. I'll have them ready for you." He didn't ask unnecessary questions. That was something I'd always appreciated about him. While I waited, I called my lawyer Rodrigo Mendoza, who was also my friend from college. He answered on the third ring, his voice sleepy. "Sebastian, do you know what time it is?" "It's New Year's Day, brother." "I need a divorce today," I said without preamble. The silence on the other end of the line was brief. "What happened?" I told him everything. The supposed migraine, the surprise party at my house, the guy named Diego, the 4-month infidelity confession, everything. Rodrigo listened without interrupting, and when I finished, his response was quick and professional. "I've got what you need. Come to my office at 10. I'll prepare the papers. With the proof you have, this'll be quick and she won't have a leg to stand on." At 9:30 a.m., I had a USB in my hands with all the security footage. Don Ernesto handed it to me with a supportive pat on the shoulder. "I'm sorry, kid. Nobody deserves to go through this." The recordings were devastating. They showed Lorena greeting her guests with effusive kisses and hugs. They showed Diego arriving at 8:30 with a very expensive bottle of champagne. They showed how she kissed him on the mouth as soon as he walked through the door, and they showed how for the next 2 hours she acted as if she were completely single, flirting, dancing, drinking, while I was at the hospital taking care of my mother. At Rodrigo's office, we reviewed all the material. "This is pure gold for the case," he said, drumming his fingers on the desk. "But there's something else you need to know. I checked your accounts and assets as you asked me to months ago. Everything is protected under your name. You bought the apartment 2 years before you got married. The car's in your name. The savings accounts too. She has no legal claim on any of this. And the credit cards I pay, the expenses I've covered?" I asked. "That's different. Technically, they were gifts or voluntary spousal support. But with proven infidelity, she loses any right to alimony or compensation. Basically, she leaves with what she brought to the marriage." "Which was?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "According to the records, nothing. Lorena had no property, significant bank accounts, or assets when you got married. She lived with her sister and worked part-time at a clothing store." The realization hit me like a punch. For 7 years, I had been her ticket to a better life. And now that she'd found someone who could offer her excitement instead of stability, I was disposable. "Prepare everything," I told Rodrigo. "I want the divorce papers ready for when she gets to the apartment at 12. Rodrigo smiled, that shark-like smile he reserved for cases he knew he'd win. "They're almost ready. I just need you to sign here, here, and here." I signed without hesitation. Every stroke of my pen was another nail in my failed marriage's coffin. I returned to the apartment at 11:30. I'd cleaned up enough so the place didn't look like a disaster zone, but I left some visible evidence. The stains on the carpet, some broken glasses I hadn't picked up intentionally. I wanted her to see the chaos she'd created. At 12 o'clock sharp, I heard knocking on the door. When I opened it, Lorena was there with her sister Paula, both with tense expressions. Lorena wore sportswear and sunglasses that probably hid eyes swollen from crying or a hangover. Paula looked at me with contempt as soon as she crossed the threshold. "Sebastian, you have to be reasonable," Paula began immediately. "Lorena made a mistake. Yes, but we all deserve a second chance. You can't destroy a 7-year marriage over one night of." For 4 months of cheating, I interrupted her, my voice cold as ice. "'Cause it wasn't one night, Paula. It was 4 months of deliberate betrayal while I worked to maintain the lifestyle your sister demanded. Lorena took off her glasses, and I saw that indeed her eyes were red and swollen. Sebastian, I made a mistake. It was the drink, the New Year's excitement. Diego means nothing to me. Oh, so that's why you said last night that he makes you feel alive in a way I don't anymore? I replied, staring at her. So that's why you kissed him at the door when he arrived, before the party even started? Her face paled. How do you know? I placed the envelope containing screenshots from the security cameras on the coffee table. The building has security cameras. It's all recorded, Lorena. Every kiss, every touch, every moment of your infidelity was documented. Paula took the envelope and pulled out the photos. As she reviewed them, her defensive expression changed to one of discomfort. Lorena, this. I came to get my things, Lorena said quickly, changing tactics. Afterwards we can talk calmly, Sebastian. Maybe in a few days when we're less upset. There's nothing to talk about, I replied. Your lawyer can contact mine. I handed her Rodrigo's business card. All the divorce papers are in process. For proven betrayal, you're not entitled to anything in this apartment, except what you brought to the marriage. That's ridiculous. Paula exploded. Lorena has lived here for 7 years. She has a right to. To nothing. I interrupted her firmly. Consult a lawyer if you don't believe me, but I'll save you time and money. It's a lost cause. I bought this apartment before we got married. The car is in my name, the bank accounts too. And with proven infidelity, she has no right to any compensation. Lorena sank onto the sofa, her face in her hands. You can't do this. Where am I going to go? Maybe Diego has space in his yoga studio, I suggested without a hint of sympathy. Or you can stay with Paula. That's not my problem anymore. You're a monster. Paula spat with venom in her voice. My sister gave you the best years of her life. Your sister gave me betrayal and lies, I replied calmly. Now you have 2 hours to pack your clothes and personal belongings. I'll be in the cafe downstairs. When that time's up, I want the keys on the table and you two out of here. Lorena looked up, and in her eyes was something new, real fear. Sebastian, please, I need time. I have no money. I haven't had a job in 3 years. You should have thought of that before you betrayed the person who paid all your bills, I said without getting upset. 2 hours, not a minute more. I left the apartment and went down to the first-floor cafe. I ordered a double coffee and sat by the window watching the street where people walked normally, oblivious to the earthquake my life was experiencing. My phone vibrated. It was a message from my sister Claudia. How's Mom? I wrote, stable. She's been discharged. Sebastian, what happened last night? You came to the hospital very upset and then ran out. Mom's worried. I didn't want to worry my mother, especially after her fall, so I wrote a vague reply. Everything's fine. Problems with Lorena, but nothing that can't be handled. I'll visit you guys later. But Claudia knew my evasive tone better than anyone. Sebastian Andres, tell me the truth now, or I'm coming over there. Claudia was 3 years younger than me, but when she went into protective sister mode, there was no stopping her. I told her everything via message, and her reply came in a flurry of angry texts. That. I always knew she was a user. I told you when you started dating her. Sebastian, do you need help? I can come right now. No, thanks. It's all in Rodrigo's hands. I just need this to be over. Okay, but if you need anything, call me. And Sebas, I'm so sorry you're going through this. You don't deserve it. Her words moved me more than I expected. Maybe it was cause in the midst of all this betrayal and pain, it was comforting to know that at least my family was on my side. Exactly 1 hour and 58 minutes later, I received a message from an unknown number. We're leaving now. The keys are on the table. It was Paula's number. I went up to the apartment and found the doors open. I entered cautiously and saw that indeed the keys were on the coffee table along with a note written in Lorena's handwriting, which I knew so well. Someday you'll understand that what happened wasn't just my fault. You also stopped fighting for our marriage. I hope you're happier alone than you were with me. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. Even on her way out, Lorena tried to blame me for her infidelity. That was the woman I had married, someone incapable of taking responsibility for her own actions. I checked the apartment. They had taken clothes, shoes, some toiletries, but everything else remained. The jewelry I'd given her on various anniversaries was thrown on the bed, as if to make me feel guilty. The expensive appliances, the furniture, everything stayed, 'cause everything had been bought with my money. I sat on the sofa, and for the first time since I discovered the betrayal, I allowed the tears to flow. I wasn't crying for Lorena. I was crying for the 7 years I'd wasted, for the future I'd imagined that would never exist, for the trust that had been shattered. But as I cried, I also felt something else. Liberation, as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I no longer had to pretend everything was okay. I no longer had to work myself to death to please someone who would never be satisfied. I no longer had to live with the lie. What I didn't know then was that the story was far from over, 'cause Lorena, desperate and out of options, was about to make a mistake that would not only sink her, but would reveal secrets that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage. And when that happened, my revenge would be much more devastating than any of us could have imagined. 3 days passed since Lorena left my apartment. 3 days in which I tried to return to some kind of normalcy, although every corner of my home reminded me of the betrayal. I'd gone back to work, facing the curious stares of my colleagues, who'd obviously noticed my missing wedding ring. No one asked directly, but the whispers in the hallways were unmistakable. My mother called twice a day to make sure I was eating and sleeping. Claudia had come to visit and practically forced me to go out to dinner, saying I couldn't lock myself up like a hermit. Rodrigo kept me updated on the legal proceedings of the divorce. Everything seemed to be moving forward as planned. It was the afternoon of the 4th day when I received a call that changed everything. It was from my bank, specifically the fraud department. "Mr. Sebastian Rojas, I'm calling about an urgent matter related to your accounts," said a professional voice on the other end of the line. "We've detected suspicious activity on your main credit card. Did you make purchases totaling 47,000 pesos in the last 24 hours? My blood ran cold. "No, I haven't made any major purchases." "I understand. The transactions include an electronics store, 2 luxury clothing boutiques, and a travel agency. We'll proceed to block the card immediately and reverse the charges. Do you have any idea who might have had access to your card?" I knew exactly who it had been: Lorena. She'd had access to my cards for years, and although I'd asked her to return them when she left, she'd obviously made copies or memorized the numbers. "Yes, I know who it was, my soon-to-be ex-wife. Can I press charges?" "Absolutely. I suggest you come to the bank tomorrow morning to fill out the necessary forms. We also recommend you file a police report for fraud." After hanging up, I immediately called Rodrigo. "You need to hear this," I said, and told him about the fraudulent transactions. "Perfect," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "This complicates everything for her. Credit card fraud is a criminal offense. She'll not only lose the divorce, she could face criminal charges. I want her to face full consequences," I said with determination. "It's not just about infidelity anymore. Now it's theft." That night, while reviewing my online statements to document all the suspicious transactions, I received a message from an unknown number. The message contained only a photo. When I opened it, I almost dropped my phone. It was a picture of Lorena and Diego taken that same day according to the date in the corner. They were in what looked like a luxurious shopping mall. She was carrying bags from expensive stores, and he had his arm around her waist. But what shocked me most was that Lorena was wearing new, expensive clothes she'd obviously just bought with my stolen credit cards. The next message arrived seconds later. "Thought you'd want to see what your money was spent on. I'm Natalia, Diego's girlfriend. Well, his ex-girlfriend now. We need to talk." My heart pounded as I typed a reply. "How did you get my number?" "I found your name in Diego's messages. It wasn't hard to look you up online. You're a civil engineer, right? Your company has your info on its website. What do you want?" I asked cautiously. "Justice. The same thing you want, I imagine. Can we meet tomorrow? I have information you need to know about your wife and my cheating boyfriend." I gave her the address of a neutral cafe near my office, and we agreed to meet the next day at 5 p.m. I barely slept that night, my mind spinning with possibilities about what information this Natalia might have. The next morning, I went to the bank as I'd been told. I filled out all the necessary forms to report the fraud and blocked all my cards. The bank manager, a middle-aged man named Hector Suarez, reviewed my case personally. "This is quite serious, Mr. Rojas. The transactions total almost 50,000 pesos. With the proof you have and the fact that you're in the process of a divorce for infidelity, this person will face serious legal consequences." "I hope so," I replied firmly. After the bank, I went straight to the police station and filed a formal complaint for credit card fraud. The officer who took my statement, a detective in his 50s with a tired face, took note of every detail. With the bank records and proof that your wife had prior access to your cards, this should be a straightforward case, he assured me. We'll issue a warrant to question her. Do you have any idea where we can locate her? I gave him the address of Paula, Lorena's sister. She's probably staying there. At 5-10 minutes, I was sitting in the cafe waiting for Natalia. She arrived on time. A woman of about 30, tall and slim, with black hair pulled back in a ponytail and eyes full of a determination that I recognized because they probably mirrored my own. Sebastian, she said, extending her hand. Thanks for coming. Thanks for contacting me. I replied as we sat down. You said you had information. Natalia took out her phone and placed it on the table. Diego and I were together for 3 years. 3 years during which he swore fidelity, talked to me about marriage, about having children. 2 months ago, I started noticing changes. He'd come home late, smell of expensive perfume, was always on his phone. I followed him one night and saw him enter a building downtown. Your building. My stomach twisted. 2 months ago, but Lorena told me they'd been together for 4 months. That's just the first lie, Natalia said bitterly. I checked his messages when I finally confronted Diego. The truth is much worse than either of us know. She slid her phone towards me. On the screen were screenshots of conversations between Diego and Lorena. I started reading, and with each message, I felt the betrayal reach new depths. The messages dated back 8 months, not 4. Lorena had been lying even about the length of the affair, but that wasn't the worst part. The messages revealed a calculated conspiracy. Sebastian works so much he'll never suspect anything. Lorena had written in a message from 6 months ago. He's still useful financially, so I'll keep up appearances until I find the right moment. Diego had replied, when are you going to leave that loser? I want us to be together officially soon, babe. Soon, love, but first I need to make sure I get everything I can from the divorce. My lawyer says if I wait until we've been married 10 years, I can claim more. That's 3 years away. I felt physically sick. It had all been an act. Lorena had planned to use me for 3 more years before divorcing me and taking half my assets. The affair hadn't been an impulse or a mistake. It had been a long-term strategy. There's more, Natalia said softly, seeing my devastated expression. She swiped to another conversation, this one from 3 weeks ago. Diego, I need you to do me a favor, Lorena had written. Do you know any lawyers who can help me hide some assets before the divorce? Sebastian has everything in his name, but if I can prove I contributed to the household, maybe I can claim compensation. My brother's a lawyer, Diego replied. But that sounds illegal, babe. It's just making sure I get what's mine. I've sacrificed years of my life for this marriage. The hypocrisy was astounding. Lorena hadn't worked in 3 years by her own choice, living completely off my money, and now she was talking about sacrifices. This is evidence of premeditation, I said, looking at Natalia. She planned all this. That's why I contacted you. Diego broke my heart, but your wife is even worse. She manipulated the whole situation. Look at this. Natalia showed another message. The New Year's Eve party was a mistake. Lorena had written 2 days after I kicked her out. Sebastian came home and ruined everything. Now he wants an immediate divorce, and I have no bargaining power. Can your brother help me get something in the divorce? I'm desperate. Diego had replied, sorry, babe, but if he caught you red-handed and has proof of infidelity, there's not much you can do legally. You don't have any money saved, do you? Sebastian controlled all the finances, but I have copies of his cards. Can I take something before he blocks them? There it was. Direct evidence that Lorena had planned the credit card fraud. This conversation had taken place 2 days before she made the fraudulent purchases. I need copies of all this, I told Natalia. This completely changes the case. I already emailed them to you, she replied. I also have call recordings where Diego admits everything. He didn't know I was recording. I did it to have evidence of his infidelity. Why are you helping me? I asked, genuinely curious. You could just walk away from all this. Natalia looked at me with eyes full of contained pain. Because Diego promised me a future he never intended to deliver. Because your wife deliberately destroyed my relationship knowing I existed, and because I believe we both deserve justice. For them to face the full consequences of their deceit and their betrayal. She was right. And with this new evidence, the consequences would be much more severe than Lorena or Diego could have imagined. That night, I sent all the screenshots and recordings to Rodrigo. His response was immediate and enthusiastic. This is legal dynamite. With this evidence of premeditation and conspiracy to commit fraud, Lorena won't just lose the divorce completely, she'll face serious criminal charges. And that Diego could also be charged as an accomplice. Sebastian, you just won this case in a landslide. I sat in my silent apartment, looking at the conversations on my phone over and over again. The pain of the betrayal was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Cold, calculated determination. Lorena had played dirty. She'd planned to use me and discard me when it was convenient. She'd stolen my money, shattered my trust, and trampled on 7 years of my life. But I had something she hadn't considered in her plans. Irrefutable evidence, unexpected allies, and a legal system that for once was on my side. The revenge that was to come wouldn't be explosive or dramatic. It would be methodical, legal, and absolutely devastating. And when it was all over, Lorena would understand that karma wasn't just a pretty word. It was a relentless force that had finally caught up with her. The court summons arrived at Paula's address exactly 1 week after my meeting with Natalia. Rodrigo called me that same afternoon to inform me that Lorena had been officially notified of the credit card fraud charges, in addition to the divorce proceedings already underway. She tried to call my office 7 times this morning, Rodrigo told me with evident satisfaction. My secretary explained that all communication must be through her own lawyer. Guess what? She hasn't hired one yet, probably because she has no money to pay for it. What happens if she can't afford legal representation for money? I asked. They'll assign her a public defender for the criminal case, but that only covers the fraud charges. For the divorce, she'll have to represent herself or find someone who works pro bono. And believe me, no competent lawyer will take her case for free when they see the evidence we have. That night, while preparing dinner in my apartment, which was finally starting to feel like my own again, I received a call from a blocked number. I hesitated before answering, but finally did. Sebastian, it was Paula's voice and it sounded tense. I need to talk to you. It's about Lorena. All communication must go through my lawyer. I replied firmly. Please, just listen to me for a minute. I'm not calling to defend my sister. I'm calling because she lied to me too. That got my attention. I'm listening. Paula sighed deeply. When Lorena came to my house after you kicked her out, she told me that you had been abusive, controlling, that you cheated on her first. She told me the man at the party was just a friend and that you had overreacted. I believed her because she's my sister. I let her stay here. I defended her. I even helped her make those purchases with your cards because she told me it was money she was legally entitled to. So you admit you knew about the fraud? I said coldly. I didn't know it was fraud. She told me she had authorization to use those cards. Sebastian, I only saw the messages between her and that Diego guy today. I found them on her laptop, which she left open in my living room. I read everything. The lies, the planning, how she was going to use you for 3 more years. My sister lied to me about everything. I could hear tears in her voice, but I felt no sympathy. And what do you want now, Paula? For me to forgive her? No, I want you to know that I'll testify in your favor if necessary. What Lorena did is wrong, completely wrong. And I was an unknowing accomplice. If there's anything I can do to help remedy this, I will. Her offer surprised me. Why would you do that? She's your sister. Because what's right is right, regardless of blood. And because if she doesn't face real consequences now, she'll continue to destroy lives. She's already destroyed yours, that Diego guy's and his girlfriends. And she almost destroyed my reputation by making me an accomplice to fraud. Enough. I've already given Rodrigo's number. Contact my lawyer. He'll tell you how to proceed. But Paula, if this is some kind of trap. It's not. I swear on my son. I'm sick of Lorena's manipulations. After hanging up, I immediately called Rodrigo to inform him. This is better than I expected, he said. With the sister's testimony confirming that Lorena lied about the origin of the money and admitting participation in the fraud, even if involuntary, the criminal case against Lorena becomes airtight. The following days were a whirlwind of legal activity. The preliminary hearing for the fraud charges was scheduled for 2 weeks from now. The divorce process was moving forward in parallel. Rodrigo had presented all the evidence of infidelity, premeditation, and fraud, requesting a swift resolution of the marriage without any compensation for Lorena. It was during this time that I received another unexpected call, this time from my mother-in-law, Marta. We hadn't spoken since before New Year's Eve. "Sebastian, please don't hang up," she said immediately. "I need to talk to you about Lorena." "Mrs. Marta, with all due respect, there's nothing to discuss. Just listen to me. Lorena came to my house yesterday crying, telling me that you'd left her on the street with nothing, that you were being cruel and unfair. She showed me the divorce papers and the criminal charges. Sebastian, is it true she stole 50,000 pesos from you?" 47,000, I corrected. "And yes, she used my credit cards without authorization after we broke up. It's fraud." "My God," Marta whispered. "She told me that money was from a joint account you had. She also lied to me about the infidelity. She said you'd only danced at a party and that you misinterpreted everything." "Mrs. Marta, your daughter had an 8-month affair with a man named Diego. She planned to use me financially for 3 more years before divorcing me to maximize what she could get from me. It's all documented. There are messages, photos, security videos. Your daughter didn't just cheat on me. She saw me as a walking bank." The silence on the other end of the line was long. Finally, Marta spoke with a broken voice. "I don't know what to say, Sebastian. I raised Lorena better than this. Her father and I taught her values, honesty. I don't understand how she became capable of doing something like this." "Neither do I, Mrs. Marta, but here we are. Is there anything I can do to help fix this? Any way to compensate you?" "The only thing you can do is make sure your daughter faces the consequences of her actions. Don't protect her from this. It's the only way she might someday learn." Marta cried softly. "You're right. I'm so sorry, Sebastian. I always considered you a good son-in-law. You didn't deserve this." 2 days before the preliminary hearing, Natalia contacted me again. "You need to see this," she wrote, attaching a link to a social media post. It was a post by Diego on his Instagram account. The photo showed Lorena lying on a bed with silk sheets, her hair spread out on the pillow, smiling at the camera. The caption read, "When you know you've found your soulmate, everything else stops mattering. Sometimes you have to destroy the old to build something new and beautiful." The post was dated 2 days ago. Thousands of people had liked and commented, most of them congratulating them. But in the comments there was also something more interesting. People who knew both of them asking about me and Natalia. "Diego, weren't you with Natalia?" someone asked. "And her husband? This is confusing." One particular comment caught my attention. It was from a woman named Carolina. "Diego, how quickly you forgot Natalia's tears and Lorena's. This is how you celebrate destroying a marriage? Shame on you." Natalia had commented on the post too, a direct reply to Diego. "Soulmate is a funny way of saying the person I cheated on you with for months while I swore fidelity. But I guess you two deserve exactly what you have. 2 liars together." Natalia's comment had over 500 likes and dozens of supportive replies. Diego's post had gone viral for all the wrong reasons. "I took screenshots of everything," Natalia wrote to me. "In case they decide to delete the post, this is more evidence that they have no remorse for what they did." She was right. The post showed a total lack of repentance. Lorena and Diego were publicly celebrating their infidelity without considering the lives they had destroyed. I sent the screenshots to Rodrigo immediately. His response was quick. "This is perfect. It shows absolute lack of remorse or awareness of the harm caused. The judge will see this and will have no mercy. Lorena is digging her own grave." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up reviewing all the evidence we had gathered. The security recordings, the messages between Lorena and Diego, the bank records of the fraud, Paula's testimony, Natalia's statements, the social media post. It was overwhelming. At 3 a.m., I received a final message from an unknown number. It was Lorena. "Sebastian, please, we can resolve this without going to court. Drop the charges. I'm begging you. I can't go to prison. I'm sorry, so sorry. I made terrible mistakes, but I don't deserve this. Please, for the years we spent together, have mercy." I read the message 3 times. I searched within myself for any trace of the man who had loved this woman, who had married her believing in a shared future. I searched for compassion, the desire to forgive. I found nothing, only a cold emptiness where my love had once been. I replied with a single message. "You should have thought about the consequences before you betrayed me, lied to me, and robbed me. See you in court." I blocked the number immediately afterwards. The next morning, as I prepared to go to the hearing, I looked at myself in the mirror. The man looking back at me was different from the one he had been just 2 weeks ago. Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, but also with something else in his eyes. Unbreakable determination. I put on my best suit, the same one I had worn at my wedding 7 years ago. An irony that was not lost on me. Rodrigo picked me up at 8 a.m. "Ready?" he asked as he drove towards the courthouse. "More than ready," I replied. "It's time for karma to do its job." When we arrived at the courthouse, I saw Lorena waiting outside with a public defender who looked overwhelmed and underprepared. She was wearing a conservative dress and had tried to look presentable, but she couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the tremor in her hands. Our eyes met for a moment. In her eyes, I saw fear, regret, and something else. The realization that she had finally gone too far, that this time there was no way to escape the consequences. I looked away and followed Rodrigo inside the courthouse. The doors closed behind us with a final, definitive sound. The revenge that had been brewing for 2 weeks was about to reach its climax. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, with dark wood walls and rows of benches for the public. The judge, a man in his 60s with gray hair and a stern expression, sat at his bench reviewing the case documents. "Case number 3478, the clerk announced. The State versus Lorena Patricia Mendez de Rojas. Charges of credit card fraud and unauthorized use of financial instruments." Lorena stood up next to her public defender, a young man who couldn't have been more than 30 and who was clearly overwhelmed by the amount of evidence against his client. I remained seated next to Rodrigo in the victims section. The prosecutor, a woman in her late 40s named Patricia Sandoval, presented the case with devastating efficiency. She explained how Lorena had used my credit cards without authorization to make purchases for 47,000 pesos, despite the fact that our marriage had ended and she no longer had permission to access my accounts. "Your Honor," said Prosecutor Sandoval, "the evidence shows clear premeditation. We have text messages where the defendant specifically plans to use the victim's credit cards before they are blocked." I quote, "Sebastian controlled all the finances, but I have copies of his cards. Can I take something before he blocks them?" The public defender tried to argue that Lorena had had legitimate access to those cards during the marriage and had simply assumed she could still use them. But the prosecutor presented bank security recordings showing Lorena using the cards days after I had reported them stolen. Then came Paula's testimony. My ex-sister-in-law took the stand with a serious expression. Under oath, she admitted that she had accompanied Lorena to make the purchases, believing the money was legitimate. "My sister lied to me," Paula declared in a clear voice. "She told me Sebastian had been abusive and that she was legally entitled to that money. I helped her because I trusted her, but then I discovered the messages where she deliberately planned to commit fraud. She used me as an accomplice without my knowledge." I saw Lorena bury her face in her hands. The blow of losing her own sister's support was visible in every line of her body. Natalia testified next, presenting the messages between Lorena and Diego, which proved the prolonged infidelity and the conspiracy to manipulate me financially. The judge read each message with an increasingly serious expression. The defendant specifically planned to maintain her marriage for 3 more years to maximize her financial benefit in an eventual divorce. The judge asked Natalia directly. "Yes, Your Honor. The messages make it very clear. She saw Sebastian as a financial resource, not as a husband." Finally, I was called to testify. I took the stand with trembling legs, but a clear mind. Under oath, I recounted the events of New Year's Eve, the discovery of the betrayal, and the devastating impact all this had had on my life. "For 7 years, I worked tirelessly to give my wife a good life," I said, looking directly at the judge. "I let her quit her job because she said she needed to find herself. I paid every bill, every luxury, every whim, and all that time she was planning to use me until she could get as much money as possible from me in a divorce. When I discovered her and ended the marriage, her response was not regret, but to steal my money to finance her new life with her lover." The public defender tried to ask some questions in cross-examination, suggesting that perhaps I had been controlling with finances, but Rodrigo objected immediately, and the judge agreed. Lorena finally had the opportunity to speak in her own defense. She stood with trembling hands, her voice barely audible. I I made terrible mistakes. She began, tears streaming down her face. The infidelity was unforgivable, but I was confused, unhappy. Sebastian worked so much that I felt lonely. That doesn't justify what I did. I know. And about the credit cards, I just panicked. I had no money, no job, nowhere to go. It was desperation, not malice. The judge looked at her with an impassive expression. Mrs. Mendez, I have reviewed all the evidence in this case. The text messages show that your use of the victim's credit cards was calculated and premeditated, not an act of momentary desperation. You specifically planned to withdraw funds before the cards were blocked. Furthermore, the evidence of your prolonged infidelity and your plan to financially manipulate your husband for years shows a pattern of deliberate deception. The judge paused, reviewing his notes. Particularly troubling is the social media post you made with your romantic accomplice, celebrating your relationship just days after committing the fraud. This shows an absolute lack of remorse or understanding of the seriousness of your actions. Lorena was now sobbing openly, but the judge showed no mercy. As for the criminal charges, I find you guilty of credit card fraud and unauthorized use of financial instruments. I will sentence you to 18 months in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 12 months if you demonstrate good conduct. In addition, you must pay full restitution of the $47,000 ES, plus interest and legal costs. The judge's gavel struck his desk with a sound that resonated throughout the room. Lorena collapsed into her chair, crying uncontrollably. The court officers approached to escort her. Before she was taken away, Lorena looked at me one last time. In her eyes was desperation, belated regret, and the realization that she had completely destroyed her own life. I felt no satisfaction in seeing her suffer, nor did I feel compassion. I only felt a definitive closure, as if a painful chapter was finally closing. Outside the courthouse, Rodrigo gave me a pat on the shoulder. The divorce process will be finalized in the next few weeks. With this criminal sentence, there's no way she can claim anything. You come out of this completely clean, Sebastian. Paula approached me with an apologetic expression. Sebastian, I'm so sorry to have been a part of this, even if it was unknowingly. My sister needs professional help. This goes beyond just making mistakes. Thank you for telling the truth, I replied. I know it wasn't easy to testify against your own sister. What's right is rarely easy, she replied sadly. Natalia was also there, watching from a distance. I approached her and extended my hand. Thank you for your help. Without your evidence, this would have been much more difficult. She shook my hand firmly. Diego received his summons this morning. They're investigating him as an accomplice. He'll probably face charges too for helping to plan the fraud. How do you feel about that? I asked. Relieved, she admitted. I can finally close that chapter and move on. I hope you can too. As I drove back home that afternoon, I felt strangely at peace. The revenge I had sought hadn't been explosive or dramatic. It had been methodical, legal, and complete. Lorena would face prison, have a criminal record that would ruin her future opportunities, and carry a restitution debt for years. Karma had done its job, and I could finally begin to heal. 6 months after Lorena's sentencing, my life had changed in ways I never would have imagined on that terrible New Year's Eve. The divorce was finalized exactly 3 weeks after the criminal trial. As Rodrigo had predicted, Lorena received absolutely nothing. The apartment remained mine, my car remained mine, and all my bank accounts remained intact. She left the marriage with exactly what she had brought. Nothing. Renovating the apartment was therapeutic. I changed the furniture, repainted the walls with colors that I had chosen, not Lorena. I removed every trace of our life together, except for a photo of our wedding that I kept in a drawer. Not for nostalgia, but as a reminder that people can change, or more accurately, that sometimes we never really knew the person we married. My mother recovered completely from her fall. Claudia and she visited me regularly, and I had begun to rebuild the friendships I had neglected during my marriage. I went out more, laughed more, lived more. At work, I received a major promotion that I had been pursuing for years. My boss confessed that he had noticed a positive change in me, a new energy and focus that was reflected in my performance. It was ironic that the worst betrayal of my life had ended up freeing me to reach my professional potential. Natalia and I had become unexpected friends. We met occasionally for coffee and to share how we were processing our respective betrayals. She had started therapy, and encouraged me to do the same. My therapist, Dr. Ramirez, helped me process not only the infidelity, but also the codependent patterns I had developed during my marriage. You worked so much partly because it was necessary, but also because you subconsciously preferred to be out of the house, Dr. Ramirez explained during a session. There were signs that something wasn't right in your marriage long before New Year's Eve. You just didn't want to see them. She was right. Lorena had shown signs of selfishness and manipulation for years, but I had chosen to ignore them, thinking that my love and my financial provision would eventually change her. Now I understood that you can't save or change someone who doesn't want to change. I heard little about Lorena directly, but news came through various channels. Paula told me she was serving her sentence in a low-security women's prison. Apparently, she had gotten a job in the prison library and was taking vocational training courses. Her relationship with Diego had ended abruptly 2 weeks after the trial, when he publicly blamed her for ruining his reputation and his yoga business. Diego faced his own legal problems. Although he was not criminally charged as an accomplice to the fraud for lack of direct evidence of participation, his yoga studio closed after dozens of clients left him upon learning of his infidelity. The public exposure of his betrayal destroyed his career and his carefully cultivated image of a spiritual and conscious instructor. You know what's ironic? Natalia told me during one of our coffees. Diego always talked about karma in his yoga classes, about how the universe eventually balances all things. I guess he finally experienced firsthand what he taught. Lorena's family had also been affected. Marta, my ex-mother-in-law, called me twice to apologize profusely. She told me that she and her husband had cut off contact with Lorena temporarily, devastated by the extent of her deceit. We raised our daughter with values, Marta told me with a broken voice. We don't understand where everything went wrong. Paula kept in touch with me occasionally, updating me on Lorena when I asked. I appreciated her honesty and her willingness to do the right thing, even when it meant going against her own sister. Lorena wrote to me from prison. Paula told me in a recent call. She says she's finally understanding the damage she caused, that the mandatory therapy in prison is helping her confront her problems. But, Sebastian, I'm not telling you this so you feel sorry for her or to convince you to forgive her. I just wanted you to know. I appreciate you telling me, I replied. And I'm glad to hear she's getting help. But that chapter of my life is closed. I genuinely wish her to find a way to be a better person, not for me, but for herself. But that no longer concerns me. The truth was that I no longer felt anger towards Lorena, nor did I feel love or even interest. I felt indifference, which in a way was the most definitive form of closure. She had become a stranger I once knew. A painful but valuable lesson about the importance of really knowing someone before committing your life to them. I had started dating other women, nothing serious yet, but I enjoyed female company without the complications or betrayals of the past. One woman in particular, Andrea, an architect I knew through a work project, had caught my attention. She was smart, financially independent, and refreshingly direct about her intentions and feelings. I'm not looking for someone to rescue me or support me, Andrea told me on our third date. I have my own life, my own career. What I'm looking for is a partner, someone to share experiences with and build something real based on mutual respect. Her words resonated deeply with me. That was exactly what I never had with Lorena and what I now knew I deserved. On a Saturday afternoon, 6 months after the trial, I was organizing some old documents when I found the envelope containing my copy of the finalized divorce papers. I held it for a moment, remembering all the pain, betrayal, and anger I had felt. Then I put them away again. Those documents no longer represented defeat or pain. They represented liberation, justice, and the opportunity to start over with hard-won wisdom. My phone vibrated with a message from Andrea. Are we still on for dinner tonight? I found a new restaurant I think you'll love. I smiled as I typed my reply. Absolutely. Pick me up at 7. As I prepared for the date that night, I looked at myself in the same mirror where I had seen myself on the morning of the trial. The man looking back at me looked different. The dark circles were gone. I had regained the weight I had lost during the stress of the divorce. And most importantly, there was something in my eyes that hadn't been there in years, genuine hope. The revenge against Lorena had been satisfying, but the real victory was this. I had regained my life, my dignity, and my ability to trust again, not in anyone, but in the right people who demonstrated with actions, not just words, that they deserved that trust. Karma had caught up with Lorena in the most devastating way possible. Not only had she lost her freedom temporarily and her reputation permanently, but she had lost the opportunity to have a comfortable life with someone who had genuinely loved her. She had traded security and true love for superficial emotions with a man who abandoned her as soon as things got tough. And I, who had been her victim, was now thriving in ways I never could have while I was trapped in that toxic marriage. Sometimes the worst betrayals end up being the best gifts because they force us to free ourselves from situations we never had the courage to leave on our own. As I left my apartment that night to meet Andrea, I closed the door behind me without looking back. The past was where it should be, behind, and the future, for the first time in years, looked bright and infinitely promising. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that made you question everything? How did you handle that situation?